Yeah. Dude, the artwork, like, yo, we gotta get a close-up of this. Like, look at the artwork here. Oh, bro, I've been waiting so long to see this. Bro, it's good. Like, yo, look at how good this looks, dude. Like, just take a look here, okay? Before I go any further, just take a look at just some of the gorgeous moments of this chapter. Like, there's just some great artwork. Like, up here, like, when you're going further, like, just look at this. There's just such a unique-looking design of the characters and stuff, how it shifts. Just, like, outright gorgeous. Like, look at this here. Like, oh my goodness. The way the shading is and all that, the line work, it's so freaking good. Oh my god, I love Hardcore Leveling Warrior. And just seeing this chapter, honestly, I'm not gonna lie. Like, this moment here down at the bottom, like, when I was reading this chapter and I saw her reappear and I saw this artwork, brought a tear to my eye. Like, I legit got a little bit emotional seeing this, because to give context here, for those that are tuning in and have no idea what Hardcore Leveling Warrior is, this character, spoilers by the way, died basically at the beginning of the story. And to give context, pretty much throughout the original Hardcore Leveling Warrior, like, this is Hardcore Leveling Warrior Earth game, aka like part 2 of the story, so to speak. Pretty much in part 1 of Hardcore Leveling Warrior, this character, Arms, died thanks to an illness, a disease, so to speak. She passed away, and she wasn't able to continue her adventure and be with the main cast of characters. And throughout the story of Hardcore Leveling Warrior Part 1, we see Ethan, our main character here, and how he has to deal with a world that is very hell-bent on making his life a living hell, but also how he lost the people that were important to him, aka, you know, her. And it legitimately is very sad what happened to her throughout the story, but thanks to certain circumstances, and thanks to the conclusion of Part 1, Ethan, our main male character of Hardcore Leveling Warrior, he was able to, so to speak, reset the clock on the world itself. He went back a few years, but in doing so, he basically made it to where he no longer even knew what he was. He no longer knew that he was Hardcore Leveling Warrior, aka an individual that became the #1 player of the game that he played called Lucid Adventure. He no longer remembered that. He sacrificed everything to basically put the world back to zero, so to speak, and thanks to that, he was able to bring the girl back that he respected a lot back to life. However, thanks to events of Hardcore Leveling Warrior Earth game, you know, Part 2, the clock that was put back ticked forward once again, and the time limit, so to speak, of her inevitable death started to get closer and closer once again. And so throughout the early segments of the story here, we see Ethan, our main character, basically trying to find any way possible to stop her death from happening. And legitimately, when you see this moment of her actually using her ability that she used in Part 1 in current day, it is just such an emotional moment. And you could tell that the writer and artist of Hardcore Leveling Warrior really wanted to express this moment with such vigor and love. Because when you see just the way this is drawn here in comparison to, like, the normal panels, like, Hardcore Leveling Warrior looks good, okay? Like, I mean, it does look good. But when you scroll down and you just see the artwork for that segment alone, you could tell just how much effort was poured into this. Like, the artist here probably dedicated maybe days, maybe weeks, just to this one little illustration here. And just the dedication, it was definitely amazing to see. But, basically, the character that has happened in the latest content, she has been saved. And seeing her fight back with Ethan and them and Master Swordsman and all that, I love it so much. It's such an amazing vibe, seeing her actually facing off against this, dude that's so sure of himself that he is incredibly powerful, #1, etc. It is just, oh, it's such an amazing feeling. So let's let's get into what's been happening. So I made a video on Hardcore Leveling Warrior Earth game when its first few chapters started to come out. When, like, you know, it had like 6 chapters or so out. I made a video on it months ago. And now that many months have passed since then, and as you could clearly see, there's over 20 chapters now, I think it's a good time to really talk about how Hardcore Leveling Warrior Part 2 is doing. Is it good? Is it bad? Is it respecting the original, or is it taking a downward spiral and worse than what its, you know, original was? Obviously, by the beginning of this video, me just really hyping up just, you know, a lot of segments already, it's very clear that Hardcore Leveling Warrior Earth game is really good. Like, it's really good. In fact, I think that it is better than it ever has been because the expansion of the world has gotten greater. Like, the scope of the world is just so much bigger than it was at the end of Part 1. Because, to kind of give context here, for those that are still watching this that maybe have not read Hardcore Leveling Warrior, Part 1 was where the main story took place within inside of a virtual game. For instance, all of our characters went into a RPG virtual world and played a game. And obviously, the main segment of the story was just in that. But thanks to the events at the end of Part 1, the very game kind of slowly spread into the real world, and now the real world and the game has merged into one, and so everything that is going on with the events is actually happening in the real world. But everybody has forgotten about Lucid Adventure, aka the original world, aka the game world that everybody played those many years ago. And the reason for that is thanks to Ethan, Hardcore Leveling Warrior, and what he did. But those that had save data, aka those that were still around when the game came to an end and was concluded, were able to get back their memories, so to speak. And that is what's been happening constantly throughout Earth Game so far. Our characters are basically doing New Game Plus. They are literally in New Game Plus, and they are beating the crap out of those that are newcomers to the game. It's pretty funny. But I like the very vibe of the story. It's very clear that the writer of this series is just a big fan of gaming in general, because you could just feel the vibe of, like, you know, how DLC is done, how New Game Plus is done, just how RPGs are done. There's a lot of things about this that just play a nod and homage to just very popular tropes and themes within gaming, and I just love that. Now, one thing though I do want to talk about is this individual right here. This character, which has been the main... Oh, like, look at this panel, dude. It's so good. Like, yo, it looks so freaking good. I love Ethan's design. But he's been going up against this dude right here, which just looks like your stereotypical antagonist or protagonist-like design. He is someone that is apparently the #1 player. And FYI, Ethan was the #1 player of Lucid Adventure. But according to what we found out, this guy right here, he has pretty much become the #1 player of almost every single game, and he wants to know more about Lucid Adventure. That obviously has been erased from the world's history, and he has just this air about him that he's just very arrogant. And Ethan, throughout his fight, is like, you need to be humbled. He uses glitched items and stuff to kind of bring him down and defeat him. There's all these little nitty-gritty things that he does to really bring this guy down, and I just love the fight. It's the mentality of two people that are the top of their class, #1 gamers, so to speak, just being tore down and realize that they really aren't the best. It's just great, because everything in this fight that's been going on in Hardcore Leveling Warrior as of late is pretty much Ethan showcasing everything he's learned since the beginning from Part 1, because one of the biggest things that was his downfall at the beginning of the story was that he got killed by a glitched item that completely broke his entire defense and, you know, paralyzed him, and it should not have been able to do that, but it did. It was a glitched item that was used against him from Zero/No-Name. And so when you see what happens in the latest chapters where he has a glitched item stab him, it's funny because he falls for the exact same thing, you know, Ethan did, which led him to character growth and development to where he became the character we know today within the story. So it does make me wonder if this character will also grow as an individual, or is he just irredeemable? Because, I mean, everything we've seen from his character thus far, he has sacrificed lives. He has legitimately used people's lives and turned them into fuel just to increase his mana supply or give him extra lives, and obviously you can't bring back the dead, those dead that are now gone, so... yeah, it's a pretty big yikes. So I don't think the character, even if he is at the same origin point as Ethan was, but thanks to his actions and just how overly evil he is, I don't think he's probably going to get redeemed. That's just my 2 cents. Now, one thing that's been very interesting going on with the world as well is that we are finding out that Ethan is, no longer the strongest anymore. And I think it's a really nice way to handle everything, because it's like, Ethan obviously is doing a New Game Plus, and all the other characters are as well. So one of the things I was wondering about was that how would the, world balancing be? Because obviously, if Ethan was already the top of his class at the end of part 1, like he was battling basically a god, how is that going to scale up and be fine in part 2? But thanks to certain things, some restrictions of New Game Plus, so to speak, he no longer has access to some abilities, but also everybody else is pretty much broken status, more broken than they were in the original base game, which I think is pretty interesting. So the ceiling of the world is a lot higher than it was within the game. So, think about it like this. Let's say the original part 1 of the story, your max level could be 99. Now, thanks to just what happened with part 2, it's like you're playing a Disgaea game. Now the max level is like 999,000. It's just, that's what's pretty much been happening. So, I do like the pacing, I like the story, the artwork, everything. Just Hardcore Leveling Warrior. It's so good to have it back. It brings me so much joy to be able to read this series again, because it really made me sad when part 1 came to an end all those years ago. And being able to now sit down and have a continuation of this, it's amazing. It's blessed. But I'll leave it at that. If you're interested in this story and you want to read it for yourself, I'll have it linked in the description for you. But I want to leave it at that. Love you guys. Be safe. Stay healthy. Chibi out.